Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping right into a really cool feature of the wffweb framework, how to master single-page application routing. We're going to focus on one super powerful method, when URI, and see how you can build these slick, dynamic web experiences completely in Java. So let's talk about a challenge that I'm sure a lot of you Java developers have faced. You want that lightning-fast, no-reload user experience that everyone expects from a modern single-page app, right? But you'd really prefer to keep your logic clean, centralized, and, secure on the server. So how in the world do you get the best of both worlds? Okay, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start by setting the stage with the Seamless Web Challenge. Then we'll dive into wffweb's unique philosophy on this. After that, we'll get into the main event, decoding the whenURI method. We'll build some routes step by step, and then we'll wrap up by looking at how you can actually trigger navigation from both the client and the server. Let's do it. Right, so first up, the Seamless Web Challenge. We're all trying to move beyond those clunky full-page reloads. You know the feeling. Every time you click something, the whole screen goes white and reloads. Traditional web apps feel slow because of this. The whole point of a single-page application, or SPA, is to make things feel fluid by only updating the little bits of the page that actually need to change. Now, this is where wffweb's philosophy gets really, really interesting. Instead of just dumping a massive JavaScript framework on the client to handle everything, wffweb keeps the brains of the operation on the server. It drives all the UI updates from your Java code, and then it just pushes the necessary changes to the browser. It's a different way of thinking. And this whole philosophy is built on what's called the MLTP architecture. That stands for Model, Logical Template, and Push. So as the developer, you really just worry about your data, the model, and how the UI is structured, the logical template. You do all that in Java. And the framework? It takes care of the push part, automatically and efficiently updating the browser for you. This quote from the documentation just nails it. The big advantage is that it changes only the needful part of the UI. It's not reloading the entire page. Think about how much more efficient that is. This is the absolute key to getting that snappy SPA-like performance, but with all the control of a server-side setup. Okay, so if we're not reloading pages, how do we show different views or content? Well, that brings us to the star of the show today, the whenURI method. You can think of this thing as the engine of all routing in wffweb. You can attach it to pretty much any HTML tag and make that tag react dynamically whenever the browser's URL changes. So how does it work? Well, whenURI is basically like a superpowered if statement for your UI. It takes three key arguments. First, you've got a predicate. That's just a fancy word for a test that looks at the URL and returns true or false. Second, you have a success handler. This is the code that runs to update your UI if that test comes back true. And third, there's an optional fail handler, which, you guessed it, runs if the test is false. Let's see what that actually looks like in practice. All right, let's get our hands dirty and actually build some routes. We're going to start with a really simple, single condition, and then see how we can chain things together to create much more complex routing logic. Okay, here is the most basic example you can have. We've got a div tag, and we call whenURI on it with a simple test. Does the URL start with /UI/user? If the answer is yes, our success handler kicks in and it replaces the div's content with a brand new h1 tag. Simple. Now, if the URL is anything else, it won't match, and because we haven't given it a failure case yet, the div just becomes empty. Now, let's fix that empty div problem by adding a fallback. See? In this version, we've added a fail supplier. So the logic is super clear now. If the URI starts with /UI/user, the div gets the h1 tag. For absolutely any other URI, it gets the h2 tag. This gives our UI a default state, which is totally crucial for a good user experience. And this is where it gets really powerful. You can chain these whenURI calls together on the exact same tag. The framework is smart. It evaluates them in order. First, it checks for /UI/user. If that's a no, it just moves on to the next whenURI call and checks for /UI/admin. If that's also a no, it finally gives up and executes the fail supplier on the very last call in the chain. It's literally like writing an if, else block in your code. This table just wraps all that up really nicely. You can see it clearly. If the URI is /UI/user, that first predicate matches. Bam, we get the h1. If it's /UI/admin, the second predicate matches, and we get the h2. And if it's something completely different, like /UI/other, neither of the first two match, so it falls all the way through to the final fail case, and we get the h3. Make sense, right? Okay, so we've spent all this time to finding how our UI should react to URL changes, but how do we actually make the URL change in the first place? Well, wffweb gives you two main ways to do it. You can do it directly from your server-side Java code, or you can trigger it from the client side with a bit of JavaScript. On the server side, you've got total control. You can just call browserpage.setURI right from your Java logic to programmatically change the URL. This is perfect for things like redirecting a user after they log in. Then you've got the client side. This is usually for when a user does something, like clicks a button. In that case, you'll use the JavaScript function wffweb.setURI. This lets the user drive the navigation. Now, that client-side function is especially flexible, and that's because it lets you run your own code before and after the navigation actually happens. So for instance, you could provide a pre-function that immediately pops up a loading spinner. Then, after the server has done its work and pushed the UI update, your post function runs, which is the perfect place to hide that spinner again. Super useful. And hey, if you don't want to keep writing that show spinner, hide spinner code over and over again for every single route, there's a better way. The framework gives you this WF Global Listeners object. You can just define onSetURI and afterSetURI functions on it once, and they'll run for every single route change across your entire application. It's a great way to keep your code clean. So here's the crucial point, the main takeaway. wffweb's whenURI method is this incredibly powerful, server-centric tool that lets you build really dynamic, single-page application experiences. And you can do it all in Java. You get all the performance benefits of an SPA with the security and control of a server-driven architecture. And this quote from the framework's homepage just drives that point home. Yeah, you have the freedom to put logic on the client side if you want, but the real power of wffweb is that your main UI logic can, and probably should, live securely on the server. And that leads me to one last thing to think about. This whole server-driven approach, it's not just about developer convenience. It's a fundamentally more secure way to build things. Think about it. If your routing logic and all your UI decisions are being made on the server, your sensitive business rules are never exposed in the client-side code. They're tucked away, safe, running in a trusted environment. And for high-security applications, that is a massive deal.